Dear viewers, welcome to the show Power Chat, Nepal's only TV talk show in English discussing development since 2016. Through this episode tonight, we are discussing about women in leadership, the global theme of the 111th International Women's Day, which is marked on March 8. Tonight, we are discussing about the issues focusing on access to health and women's reproductive and health rights. And I am joined tonight by two distinguished guests. Dr. Sabhana Pradhan, she is a gynecologist, and Dr. Sachin Ghimire, a medical anthropologist. Let's talk. Welcome to the show, Dr. Sabhana Pradhan.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank you.
Dr. Sachin Ghimire.
Thank you, Leslie.
How have you been?
We are good. Thank you.
Well, both of you have been long engaged in the field of medical and health advocacy, I would say. I would like to start with the global theme of International Women's Day that is being marked on 8th of March. Today. So, Dr. Sabhana, how do you observe the overall status of women in relations to claiming their rights in Nepal?
Well, in Nepal, I will say that the status of women in Nepal is half-filled. I will say that if you want to see in the positive aspect, it's not too bad. But at the same time, if you go to the grassroots level, our status of women is very, very bad. The status of women from womb to tomb is very questionable if you talk about the rights of women, whether it is ensured or not.
Well, Dr. Ghimire, how do you observe the overall status of women in Nepal?
Okay, thank you, Lakshmanji. Actually, in my point of view, if I have to analyze or let's say observe the overall status of women, then for me it connotes some kind of diverse realities. Since our society is divided in different kind of caste, class, regional and other kind of structural inequities, then that kind of structural inequities are directly penetrated the social status of our Nepalese women. If you see, just like if you see the education status of Upper Himalayan region, and then if you compare it with the people from, let's say, the women from Hill region or Tarai region, we really can see vast differences. That's why, on one hand we can see that the educated class who have got the privilege to join the boarding school or got the higher education, their cognition level, their education level, their awareness level, and then if you see the people, let's say the people here means I'm especially talking about the women, and then if you see the people from different strata of the society, what I can see that there is a huge gap between the women, even in the something called the Nepali women, that's why what I see that there is a huge gap. That's why in a single sense I really cannot interpret that okay, it is mean by the status. For me, it's a very divided, and because of the power relationship, because of the structural, differences, and because of all sort of, class and then, caste differences. That's why for me it's really a bizarre and it's really heterogeneous.
What is this preventing women to, lead different platforms, including that of the socio-political, economic, and claiming their own cultural and health rights?
Actually, what I think is that there is not only the single factor which is really preventing women to get empowered, to access all sort of opportunities or just to claim all sort of rights. What I see is that there are the heterogeneous factors. There are the social factors, cultural factors, geographical factors, and then other sort of factors are really preventing. For example, I would like to throw one example. Just like government has already announced that there will be the 24 hours institutional delivery. This is some kind of the policy level connotation expressed or written by the government in its policy document. But if you see in the empirical level, one hand there will be the delay in care. There will be the late decision to get care. Other hand, and there will be very delay in seeking care. And then again there will be another level will come, delay in getting treatment. So this kind of factors, delay in seeking care, delay in getting care, and delay in getting treatment, it has all sort of structural dynamics, because one hand, for one hand, family themselves are very less empowered to provide the timely treatment or timely service to the needy woman. On the other hand, once you will decide that okay, she has to take to the hospital timely in the case of emergency complication, then there will be some kind of financial and then cultural and then geographical barrier will also come there. There won't be the bridge, there won't be the vehicle, and then for instance, after crossing all sort of geographical barrier, that person, or let's say the needy woman, will reach to the health institution, there won't be the staff.
Well,
There won't be the technology.
Well,
And then
thank you,
for-
Dr.
that's
Kinnari. I will come
that
back
kind of
to you.
scenario is there. Yeah.
Dr. Sabana, how do you assess the way males and females are being treated in our society, very beginning from the birth?
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, if you look at the Nepali society, how we are brought up, when they say that they are all equal. I mean, Nepali Hinduism, if we call in the Hinduism, they are brought up in equally. I will say that one. But however, practically it is not. Like I will say the to tomb. The discrimination is there right from the womb. Like, you are discriminated there. Like there is a sex selection, abortions are also very much prevalent. This is especially seen in the Tarai region than in the Himalayan and Pahari region, yes. But on the other hand, if you say that women's empowerment, if you talk about that in the Himalayan region, one lady would have married and have 4 husbands. That's also there. So you can take it in the both aspect. Well, that's one of the things, like sex selection, abortions. But once you are birth in the childhood at home, there is like a more favor to the your sons than the daughter. Favoritism is also there from the parents' side or grandparents' side. And the other thing is, again, school-going children, like school-going males are more favored to send to the better schools than the women, girls. And the girls are expected to, help mother at home doing all the chores, whereas the men, they are like not expected to do so much. Maybe they will do some other thing, but not so much. Similarly, once they are grown up, like early child marriage, like it is some type of expected, and traditionally, you accept the situation. So that is the one of the other things, like all early childhood marriage, and your women's status in your family itself, they are not given so much of priority. So once they are not given so much of priority, so then everything will be curtailed. For example, like when Sachin said that, going to the hospitals, because if you would have prioritized that one, you would have planned. Suppose if I have to go for the planned pregnancy, then I would say that if I want to get pregnant, when will I get pregnant? Where will I go for that one? Who is my healthcare workers? Where will I go? Whether the hospital's services are available or not. If not, where will I go that one? How will I go? What is the transportation? Whether I have enough money or not. Whether I can take loan from the bank or not. All those things will be taken care of. Like you prioritize the things. It's not that Nepalese community or Nepalese people are foolish or fool. It's just that you do not keep that in the priority sector. That's why is the problem here. And this notion of prioritizing comes right from home to the policy making level. That's what I would like to say. Not just home, not just from the family, not just that educated or not educated. It's nothing to do with whether you have gone to school or not. It is the quality of awareness and the consequences brought up by that is the most important thing.
What you have to say about the legal and policy issues? Do you see the legal and policy environment as enabling one?
Well, I will say in books, our constitution is great. We have fundamental rights, you see, 16 to 48, including rights and duties. Beautiful. I mean, they talk about like health rights, women's rights, and also the right of the victims. I mean, right of the victim is one of the, I that's what I heard, that it is one of the only fundamental right in the whole world. So isn't this sounds wonderful? Yes. And also we have ratified so many of international human rights treaties, and that is also there. And then when you have international human rights treaties, when you have that one, they make sure that you make the law and rules and regulation aligning with that one. So in books, it is wonderful. Maybe there is some few of the things that where you can do some editing or amendments, all those things are there. But the main question is the implementation. And that implementation, I will say, subnormal level. And it is harmful. When you say that ignorance of law is no excuse. Who knows this? I didn't know 5 years back. So that means the state need to ensure that the people knows what are their rights, what is law, and also state need to make sure that these things are accessible, available, and it's of quality. So when it is not available there on the table, when it at time of needs, so it's no use of having, it's just there in the as a black letters.
Well, Dr. Ghimire, what you have to say about the non-implementation of several national and international laws that ensures not only women's rights but women's health and reproductive and sexual rights and access? What are the reasons behind non-implementation of these instruments, and what are your suggestions to the stakeholders implementing these instruments effectively?
Okay, in this case, what I see is that there are both kind of gaps, just like what I would like to simply term them as a PAP gap and then CAP gap. For me, the PAP gap is some kind of policy and practice gap, and CAP gap is knowledge and practice gap. Just like Dr. Savannah has mentioned that somehow, let's say quote unquote, somehow the policies are really wonderful. Even in this current Reproductive Health Act also, it has clearly mentioned that whenever it is necessary, the needy women should get all sort of education, information, and counseling services, regarding, let's say, abortion or delivery or other kind of reproductive health services. But if I have to, criticize each and every terminology, or let's say interpret each and every terminology in a little bit nuanced way, then what I say is that, regarding information, one hand, we have a mechanism that, we really deliver some kind of homogeneous, or let's say some kind of universal kind of information. If society is, empirically very heterogeneous, and then it has some kind of different kind of lingual realities, it is very hard to capture all sort of information which has been delivered by national media, or let's say all sort of top-down approach. So that there should be different lingual approach, or let's say multilingual approach, to make them really effective. And then that's why the people from different lingual background also they can grasp the information. So that will be really useful. And then in second point, what I would like to delineate is that it's about the education. It has clearly written that the needy person, or let's say the women should get proper education. One hand, you can see the overall education status in village level, or let's say in the rural level. The people who are just high school pass out are giving delivery to the babies, and then most of them are even not +2 pass out. In this case, if mothers themselves have very low level of education, it is directly going to affect their personal health as well as their child's health. So that in this way, in the dynamics, in the factor of the education also, it directly affects the sense of following this reproductive right, and then health related awareness. And another thing is, it has also clearly mentioned that there should be proper counseling services. What I really doubt is that even our health educators, or let's say health staffs, are also not so well trained regarding the counseling services. That's why it's very easy to write in a paper. Perhaps you just pick up the pen and then you write in a white paper, or you just write something else in a white paper. Perhaps it might be easy to write, but it's really challenging to articulate themselves, or those policies, provisions, or policy commitment in the empirical level. That's why what I see, the CAP gap, knowledge and practice gap also in this case. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Savannah, you at the beginning said that in some contexts in the Himalayan regions, women were able to marry 4 husbands around. Could you tell us cultural taboos and their impacts to the reproductive health rights?
Okay. First of all, I would like to say that reproductive health rights should be individualized. The women should have the right to decide, right to decide, right to decide on everything, like when she is going to get married, whom is she going to marry, whom is she going to have a relationship, or an intimate relationship, and when is she going to have a baby, whether she wants a baby or not want a baby, and how many and when. Those things should be her individual rights, that should be ensured. That is one, I mean, it is her own thing, it's her special thing, and this has to be ensured, and this has to be like whatever we are talking about this awareness, counseling, this and that, she has to understand that one, and she should be able to decide, and this is what should be ensured by the state. And now, coming out about the tradition about women being able to marry 4 or 5 husbands, that is their cultural sector. In Himalayan region, that's their culture. I mean, in the mountain, another thing, maybe.
Don't you consider that cultural, practice some other way of obstructing, ensuring the reproductive, necessities and reproductive rights of an individual, giving invitation to these several kind of diseases or medical issues, problems?
I mean, if you say that one, I mean, I will say, like, you can look in the both the aspect. One thing is like polygamous relationship is not good. We know that one. It invites a lot of sexually transmitted disease, HIV, other things. Like if you say that men being able to marry 5 wives and women being able to marry 4 husbands, is there any difference? No. Why should it be? Just that in the mountains, it is like their culture, but whereas it is not so in the other rest part of the world, I mean the rest part of Nepal, I will say. But on the other hand, as you asked about regarding about from the diseases or as such, yes, in the both the side it will have that effect. Definitely. So basically, for what we are talking about, the sexual reproductive health rights of the women should be able to decide. That is the one of the most important thing. Like if she decides that she will have a separation from her existing partner and have another one, she should have all the information regarding her health and the consequences of that one and how to prevent those thing from occurring. So that is the counseling she should get. But however, if she decides to do that one, why not legally?
Well,
Yeah.
Dr. Ghimire, do you agree to the observations and criticisms around that women confine themselves into families rather than taking care about their own health rights or claiming leadership in our society?
Actually, if we say from that point of view, then it will be some kind of victim blaming approach. I really don't blame any kind of let's say women because of their own choice or own decision they are confining themselves, because it's the structure, it's the patriarchy, it's all sort of other kind of power relationship which compel them to confine inside the private sphere, And then just before Dr. Sapana was highlighting that, just like what I would like to just simply pick out one term called the Hinduism, So we're simply saying that, Hinduism has given some sort of opportunity. But for me, what I see is that, Hinduism has really propagated some kind of double standard kind of values. One hand, it has celebrated women's status so just like Lord Durga as a symbol of power, Lord Saraswati as a symbol of knowledge, and Lord Lakshmi as a symbol of wealth. But on the other hand, it has also, let's say it has also reproduced or let's say propagated another kind of values like the women when they are let's say in the kids form, they should be controlled by their father, in their young age they should be controlled by their husband, and in their old age they should be controlled by their sons. It means, though it has celebrated women's status in different way, on the other hand, it has equally discriminated women's, position by, inducing all sort of religious, cultural, and other sort of values. That's why the religion itself has just like just nurture the very double standard kind of values in our society, and it's a Hindu dominated society, and then our culture is dominated from Hindu society. That's why what I see that there should be just before you were asking me that what could be the suggestion, what I see that there should be also the drastic awareness, or let's say we have to spread the drastic awareness, or we have to bring the drastic awareness inside the domain of religion also. We have to educate the priests, we have to educate all sort of faith healers and other kind of religious practitioners who are really producing and reproducing this kind of ideologies or this kind of patriarchal values which are guided from religious doctrine. We have to work on that. That's why even we have to work to change the religious values also. It should not be static. And then what you were simply asking, and then Dr. Sabana was trying to interpret it that for me also what I think is that in other caste groups also, if they have some kind of practices regarding polygamy, then if you see from one point of view, it might be their cultural rights. But if you see from other point of view, or let's say human rights point of view, then what I personally think is that the single male really cannot do the fair treatment to more females. It's really discriminating.
Yes, irrespective of any religions or
that's why,
caste, discrimination and violence should not be accepted anywhere. But yes.
But what I will just add on to what Dr. Sachin has said, that one, now at least in the present day situation, we know what is our tradition, what is our Hinduism or many other religion. So now this is the time that we can have a healthy discussion. And what is the technology? We have so much of technology, we have so much of evidence-based medical practices. So we can bring together and align with that one and put on the table what is the right thing to do. And
well, Dr. Sabana, I would like to listen your observation about the increase, I would say, growth in cases of the violence against women by different sections, including that of the family members and sometimes in some groups as well. So what are the reasons behind increasing numbers of violence against women, including that of the rape?
What are the reasons behind that one? Somebody said to me, rape cannot be abolished. There is rape because there are men. Somebody said like that. The cases are rape is there because there are men around. So, so that means we have to educate the men to respect women. To respect, but however, we know that there are rape on the male sex as well. But the thing is, what I meant to say is respect and giving care to that opposite sex or whatever is one of the most important thing. That one. The second thing I would say is, you should not be glorifying rape. So glorifying rape in the society is another thing. How do you glorify? One thing, right from the home itself. When somebody rapes, when you hear somebody has raped, they try to suppress that event. That itself increases the incidence of rape. So it suppresses at home, it suppresses in the offices, it suppresses from our judicial system, it increases from the media side, it increases from all these YouTube, social media, and their type of glorifying, and that is also one of the things they were saying, that this media journalism or accessible to listen about the rape itself has increased the incidence of rape. But then we need to make sure how to mitigate that one. So those are the things. And
how can these incidents, mitigated?
Mitigating. Well, I will say that how to mitigate. One thing is, I just said that one, how to prevent that one, and educating the men and also educating the women, and also at home, like rape, as I have understood that almost about 75 to 80% of the rapes happen in children that's less than 18 years old of age. And also they said that about almost 1/3 of the rape itself, that is which has come to the court as a court case, is under the age of 10 years of age. That means that children are being raped. So these things can be mitigated by educating the parents. And those rapes are done by the family member, by the close relatives, by the neighbors. In Nepali society, all our neighbors are our uncle and aunt, our brother and sister. So we can never think of somebody harming you, but actually it is happening.
What about the state of impunity? Very
Impunity,
quickly?
oh yes, I will say that state of impunity is very high in Nepal. Very high in Nepal. That is also one of the things that perpetrators are going offhand. Even though they do the heinous crime as the rape, the impunity is very, very high. And that is also another thing that the incidence of rape in Nepal is increasing.
Well, you are sharing with us very interesting issues, but we are coming to the end of the show. Finally, what you have to recommend to the stakeholders, including the state agencies and other organizations here in Nepal working for creating just society for men and women, very quickly.
Very quickly, okay. We have laws and rules and regulation is existing. It should be accountable. The implementation must be enforced. It should be accountable. The responsible partnership should be done, and monitoring and feedback must be there. And this should be done by the third party, not the same party doing that one, by the third party, and it should be very much transparent. And that will definitely make a lot of difference.
Dr. Ghimire, your final thoughts?
Yeah, actually, what I think is that there should be some kind of a holistic awareness, holistic approach. Actually, there should be, for instance, there should be policy provisions, strict policy provisions, just to suppress all sort of different kind of violence against women, just like acid attack, or let's say just a rape or other sort of honor killing. And on the other hand, there should be education, from our school level to our higher education level, and there should be empowerment approach. That's why if we really can articulate all sort of multiple means to educate, to empower, and then also with some kind of strict legal provisions, then of course what I think is that it's really going to work out. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for joining our show. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lakshman.
Dear
and the
viewers,
team.
time now to wrap up the show. Keep watching us. See you next week. Namaste.